Now, one thing before I start this topic is a very famous hadith that you all know, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that shyness is part of Iman. Okay, it's part of our faith. So to feel shy on certain things is natural, and sometimes it's very good. If you feel shy about few things, that's very good because it is a sign of Iman. If people do not have shyness, then there is some problem with their Iman and they should really review themselves. And this topic of adults that we are going to discuss, the discharges related to the adults. Now this is definitely some brothers and sisters in particular might feel shy about it, but I am going to follow the footsteps of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm going to tell you exactly those things what our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us. Okay, and this is important because we see two extremes in our societies. There are people who don't know what the basic knowledge related to these are, and there are some people who try to overdo things, try to go to extremes. So for example, this topic is usually not discussed a lot. Now parents definitely don't discuss with their children all these issues because the shyness again comes in. And of course our children are not taught in our schools. In their biology class they're going to teach the human sciences, they're going to teach really what the medical science speaks. They are not going to cover what Islam talks about, what religion teaches. And also many people don't have interest in reading Islamic books also. So this knowledge is a problem in our societies. Many people do not know, and some of the people might get this knowledge from their friends or somewhere who do not have the correct information, and they are going to live all their lives with this incorrect information or half knowledge. And they say always that little knowledge is very dangerous. Little knowledge is very dangerous, more dangerous than not having knowledge at all. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but there are a few basic things which everybody should know. Okay, and this is exactly what I'm going to cover, inshallah. And during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we had these two groups, like one the group of Muhajirs and the other group of Ansaris of Medina. So the Meccans, the Muhajirs, they were more like shy, they were closed, they wouldn't like ask questions. But the Ansari people they were bold and they would ask questions, especially related to these the adult topics. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she asked one time, she noticed something, that Ansari woman was asking questions to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is mentioned in a hadith in Sahih Muslim. She said, "May Allah have mercy on Ansari women, because their shyness does not prevent them from seeking knowledge and understanding the religion, from acquiring knowledge and understanding the religion." So she saw it as a positive point, because when it comes to Islam, when it comes to seeking knowledge, there is no shyness. So in today's halaqah, the shyness that you have to keep it aside and learn and ask questions as much as you want. Okay, because if you are uncomfortable with something and if you are not asking the questions or not learning this, then it's a problem. It's the only one who's going to be the winner is shaitan, because he is going to be happy that this knowledge is not being learned, or some important issue that you have, you're not asking it, and this is going to affect. Now the way it affects is, if you do not have the right knowledge, the worship that you do, right? So this worship we do with a lot of hard work, right? So when you go on Day of Judgment, you'll be so happy, oh, I got this much of ibadah, this much of worship, and then you realize that most of it is, for example, rejected. Why? Because there was some basic knowledge that you are supposed to know. You are not supposed to worship in certain situations. You didn't do proper purification, and you just worship like that. So that's a problem. This worship might not be acceptable if you do not have this basic knowledge. Okay, so there is one sector, there is one group of people who do not know anything, or know very little or incorrect knowledge. But there are other people who go to other extreme, wherein this happened to Ali radiallahu anhu, the son-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was having a discharge. We're going to discuss this later again, but he was very shy to ask to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he sent another Sahabi to ask this question on behalf of him to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And basically what he was doing was, every time he had a discharge, he would take a shower. Every time he would take a shower, even though it was not necessary. Not in all situations we take a shower or ghusl. So it was becoming very difficult for him. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told at that particular situation that this particular discharge, you do not need to make ghusl, you just need to make wudu and so on, that we are going to discuss. So there are people that you will see who do not have the knowledge, and they try to be safe, try to be very defensive, and the little thing happens to them, they say, oh, I will take a shower, I have to take a shower. You don't have to do that. So knowledge comes to the rescue all the time. So this is something why we need to learn something, what we need to discuss with our friends, our colleagues, our children, if possible, in whatever way. So let's get started here. Okay, so I'm going to be very frank today. I'm going to be very explicit. Brother Najib is not going to be shy today, because this is what our religion teaches us. When it comes to this topic, we have to know everything. We have to know everything. Otherwise, Shaitan is going to laugh at us on the day of judgment that, the ignorance cost us our worship. We lost, all our hard work went to drain. Anyways, so this slide, I made it in one table. I'm going to be discussing perhaps most of the halaqah today, just talking about this, instead of making multiple slides, because many people get confused with different types of discharges. Now, there are three main sexual discharges that I want to cover, and that's called, first one is madhi, second one is mani, and third one is wadi. So, and I'm going to be discussing the characteristics, how they are different, what's the difference between first, second, and third, and what's the commonality. Now, these two are more important, and this applies to basically both men and women, all of these, most of these, as we will see. And but first and second, madhi and mani, are more important. This is very commonly occurring. Now, when a child is born, right, or when even before that, the fetus or the embryo, which of these three liquids you think a child is born from? Is it the madhi or the mani or vadi? It's this one, okay? This is the main one. This is the sperm, which we call mani. This is that fluid that causes the embryo to fertilize and so on. And the madhi, so what's the difference between madhi and mani? So madhi is pre-seminal fluid and mani is sperm. So what's the difference here is, the characteristic wise, this one it comes out in small amount. Madhi is very small amount. It doesn't come in large quantity. Mani is in larger quantity. Now, when does this come? So this madhi comes when when somebody is thinking about or seeing something which is sexual, right? So that's the fluid that comes out. Now, if there is a brother or a sister or anybody, if they are thinking about their spouse and they are having the sexual activity in their thoughts even, so this is the fluid that comes out most often. This is called the madhi, and this is basically a small discharge. And the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created is that it happens to both men and women. Whenever the sexual thoughts come in, or whenever they are actually involved in the sexual process, this is the first liquid that comes out, and it is a very small quantity, and it comes out in like 1 or 2 drops, like very small quantity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for women, because when this is emitted, the sexual activity becomes easier. It acts as a lubricant, as we learned in our biology class. So this helps. So this is something that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, and this it's not something that is commonly considered to be part of the child's birth. Okay, so this is the second one, the mani, that's responsible. The sperm, it comes out when you reach the peak. We call the orgasm. Orgasm is something which is the highest point of sexual excitement. Okay, and this is, in both the cases, pleasure is involved, right? So, but this is the case we say this is the highest amount of sexual excitement. So this is orgasm, and this can happen to both men and women, as we will see from the ahadith. But this one happens in foreplay and thoughts. So let me cover one by one. The most important thing that you should remember is that I have it here. When this comes out from your private parts, whether male or female, wudu gets broken. So you have to do wudu. Okay, you have to. But we discussed earlier, we mentioned earlier, anything that comes out of your private parts, no matter what it is, your wudu is gone. So madhi is no different. So you have to make wudu. And purity-wise also, this is considered najas. So what does najas mean? Something impure. So when we say something is impure, it has to be cleaned. Cleaned from what? From two things. First thing is your private parts. Second thing is your clothing. So your body and your clothes both need to be clean from this particular fluid. If you have this discharge on your clothes or on your body and you pray your salah with it, it's a problem. It's a problem. It's something that you have to completely remove before praying your salah. Okay. Now, how do you clean it? We mentioned this in the previous halaqah, the different ways of cleaning najas. This is the same thing. Now, what the scholars mention here is that you have to clean your private parts as well, and this is mentioned in Abu Dawood. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that it is sufficient for you to pour a handful of water on the part of your clothes where you see the madhi has gotten onto them. Okay, so this is for clothing. And when it comes to washing the private parts, you have to wash the entire area. Okay, so just cleaning the tip, for example, is not sufficient. You have to clean the private part. The scholar said that if you sprinkle water on your clothes, that is sufficient as well, and Sharia made it easy on them. So if you see the marks of this discharge on your clothing, then you sprinkle water on it and it should be sufficient, but you have to do it. Some people are careless. Some people don't even know that they have this discharge. So you have to be careful before you make salah or anything. See whether your clothing has these spots. Okay. So this can again happen to anybody, whether married or not. Anytime these thoughts come in, we have to check whether this particular discharge was there or not. Do we need to make ghusl? Do we have to take shower if this particular discharge is emitted? No, we don't have to. We don't have to. So this one only breaks wudu, and all you have to do is make sure you wash your private parts and your clothing. Not wash, you just have to sprinkle. That is sufficient. You don't have to wash the clothes at all. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's basically Sharia was made easy upon us. So you just have to sprinkle, and because the quantity is very small, so that's the reason why we don't have to wash. So in the hadith, it was very explicit. He said that let him wash. This is the hadith of Ali radiallahu anhu, that he made other sahabi ask Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said that let him wash his private parts and then do wudu. So these two things that he has to do apart from sprinkling on the clothes. Difference again between madhi and mani is that when madhi is emitted, the desire is still there. The sexual desire that a person has, that doesn't stop. So that keeps on continuing. But when this is emitted, when mani is emitted, the sexual desire immediately comes to the halt. That's like orgasm is like the highest point, and then it like drops down. So there's no more sexual activities, particularly in men. Okay, so that's the main difference. What kind of liquid it is you see what kind of pleasure that you have. If it is like all the pleasures go down, all the desires go down, then it is money. It emits and it causes you to relax. It's not the same thing as madi, where madi can continue for more time. He can have like different times this particular discharge and still continue. And the characteristic also, it's mentioned that it's thin and white in color, unlike mani, which is thick and white. This is more for male. We're going to discuss later on again also about female. But this particular part, you should be very clear now what exactly is madi. And this can happen to any person. It can happen to... So in our Sharia, basically, in this country, for example, right? When you say somebody is an adult, they usually think like they are 18 plus, right? That's the definition of adult. But in our Sharia, adult, a person becomes adult not at a specific age. They become adult when they have these kind of discharges. So if somebody emits madhi or mani, so these kind of fluids are emitted, then they automatically becomes adult. So this can happen maybe even at like 12 years, okay? This can happen even at 12 years. And by default, boy is considered adult by 15 years old, regardless he has this kind of discharge or not. By 15 years, he is definitely adult. But if he has these discharges before 15, maybe at like 12 or 13 years, he becomes adult from that point. And for sisters that we're going to see in next halaqah inshallah, or maybe today, if they have menses, they immediately become adult. Okay, so there is either you're a child or adult. There is no middle thing in between. So if you have your menses in like 11 years, khalas, hajj becomes obligatory on that girl. So that's the difference. There's no like teen years, there is no middle group in Islam. So either you're a child or an adult. And immediately all the 5 prayers become obligatory on you as well. Now let's talk about money, which we mentioned earlier. This is the main discharge that is responsible for our origin, our birth. We are born out of this fluid. Okay? And as I said, this is the one which is emitted with pleasure, just like madhi. It is emitted with pleasure. The main difference here is that the quantity is larger. Unlike madhi, which is like maybe 1 drop or so, this one is emitted in larger quantity. And the way it comes out is that it gushes out in sprouts. Okay, it's like it's with force. So that's one thing. And as we mentioned earlier also, that the desire ceases immediately after the ejaculation of this part. So when I mention ejaculation, it's mainly this particular discharge. Women also have this particular discharge. You know, it's not that common in women, but women also can have orgasm, and they can emit this particular fluid as well. In fact, one Ansari, she asked this question to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So she went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she asked, Ya Rasulullah, Allah is not too shy to tell us the truth. Does a woman have to do ghusl if she has a wet dream? And the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yes, if she sees a discharge. Okay, so that's something that mentioned that. And in the continuation of that hadith, Salama, she covered her face and she said, oh, Ya Rasulullah, can a woman have an erotic dream? Can she have a wet dream? He said, yes. How else would a child resemble her? So this is proven from hadith that this happens to women as well. But there's a difference between men and women. For men, it is like thick and white. But for women, it is mentioned that it is different in color and in its characteristic. It is thin. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned this in Muslim, Sahih Muslim, the water of the man is thick and white and the water of the woman is thin and yellow. Okay, so this is how you recognize. And the reason why you need to know this is because if this particular one is emitted, then you have to do ghusl. You cannot pray. You cannot pray without ghusl. Some people do not know. When I was a teenager, I knew so many friends. They didn't know this fact. They would have a wet dream, and they would have this discharge, and they would just make wudu and pray. They just thought that it breaks wudu. They did not know that ghusl becomes compulsory. So, regardless whether it's a man or a woman, they need to do ghusl. For a woman, the exhaustion is not necessarily the case. So the man, after ejaculation, this discharge, he doesn't have any more sexual interest or sexual desire, but a woman might continue to have. Okay, so that's a difference. And Rasulullah ﷺ also mentioned this in hadith. He was very explicit. He would just mention to people when it comes to this topic. He would say, when she was asked, does a woman have to do ghusl if, such a thing happens? He said, yes, women are the twin halves of men. So this is also something happens to women as well. Now, but in women, this is not the fluid that is responsible for childbirth. Okay, so for man's sperm reaches the egg of a woman, then that's where the fertilization happens. But the money of a woman is not responsible for the child. Something about wet dream. Okay, in Arabic this is called ihtilam. This is most commonly occurs in teenagers or the people who are not married. So a wet dream is something, this is natural, it's a biological process. This is when you are sleeping, money can come out. Maybe you're thinking about some sexual activity in the dream, and this particular fluid might come out. Okay, so if that happens, that is called wet dream. And it doesn't matter. So even though you are not really responsible for what happened, because you're sleeping, but it doesn't matter. If in your sleep such a thing happens, even though you had no control over it, same rulings apply. You still have to do ghusl. Obviously your wudu is broken, and you consider it as money. Okay, and the proof that you have is obviously you can see it, notice in your clothing whether the characteristic was of madi or money. Money, as we said, it is larger in quantity, maybe like 10-12 drops or more. So this is larger in quantity, but madi usually happens, it comes out in small amounts, 1 or 2 drops. Some people remember they had wet dream. Okay, so they feel the pleasure in their sleep. Sometimes people wake up, okay, I had wet dream now. So they remember, but sometimes there are some people who do not remember. Maybe they wake up for Fajr Salah and they notice that I have this discharge in my clothes. So that's when they realize, oh, probably I had a wet dream. So then they have to take ghusl and then come to the masjid. So you have to, if you are the person who get wet dreams without you even knowing it or remembering it, then you should make it a habit to check your clothing whenever you are about to pray, so that you can do ghusl in time. This particular fluid, again, when we say a man and a woman is involved in sexual activity and a child is born, this is the main discharge that happens. Okay, but this is not necessarily the case. Sometimes a man or a woman she or he might be seeing something, and because of that the discharge can come out. Usually it's the madi that comes out, but if it was intense, then even the money can come out by even just thoughts or even the seeing something. That's possible. So regardless, we always look at the characteristics. If the characteristic matches, we do appropriate wudu or ghusl. Now scholars discuss some very fine points related to money and the different possibilities that can occur. First important thing that you should know is mani, the sperm. This one is not najas like madi. And the scholars obviously mentioned that, this is our origin, like we are born out of something, then that cannot be impure. We are not born of impure thing, we are born of pure thing. Okay? And that's majority of the scholars, it is their opinion that it is tahir. Tahir means something pure. It doesn't purify, it is not tahur, but it's tahir. So if somebody, for example, they had this discharge of money, so they wake up in the morning and they notice it and they say, okay, I will have to take ghusl. So they take the ghusl and they wear the same clothing which has sperm or the money on it, and they pray their salah. Is their salah going to be valid? It is going to be valid because it is not najas. However, it's something, it's a disgusting thing for many people, right? So we need to remove it. Just like, maybe like if you have a cough or a cold, the nose flows and falls on your clothes, you want to remove it. So something like that, you have to try to remove it. And in fact, this is mentioned in hadith in Sahih Muslim, that Aisha radiallahu anha was the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said that I remember scratching it. I remember scratching the semen or the sperm from the garment of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he prayed in it. So this happened that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had money on his clothing. So Aisha radiallahu anha, what she did, she just scratched it, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wore it, and then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed with those clothing. But if it was najas, Aisha radiallahu anha, she would clean it or sprinkle it or wash it. She did not do any of those. She just removed it so that it doesn't look, people don't see it, or maybe a person when he wears it, it doesn't have this feeling of dislike. So you remove it. But if somebody forgets or somebody doesn't even want to remove that money from the clothing and they pray, that is fine. Their prayer will be accepted. But majority of the problem is this part. That's the main reason that I want to focus in this halaqah. Especially the teenagers, they have no clue that madhi is najas. If you pray your salah with madhi on your clothing, there is a big problem. That is a big problem. Your salah will not be accepted. Many people do not know this. Okay, they probably see a magazine or something on TV and they couldn't control, and a little bit of madhi comes out, maybe even just a drop. They have to clean their private parts and sprinkle on their clothing, and definitely wudu has to be made. This is the major problem in our community. Many people don't know this. So we discussed ghusl before. So when do you become a junub person? When are you called a junub person? Which discharge should be emitted in order for you to become junub? So it is this one, right? Because we said a junub person is required to do ghusl. This one, you don't become junub. So immediately once you do wudu, you can do anything. You can read Quran, you can worship, everything. And for women also. So there are a few things that married people need to know for sure. And unfortunately, when people get married and they don't even know the basic rulings, it's a problem. Anyways, so when a man and a woman get involved in the sexual activity and this particular discharge is emitted, the ejaculation takes place, right? So if this happens at night, for example, can you just go back to sleep, or do you have to make ghusl right there and then go back to sleep? What's the ruling on this one? So from the ahadith we find three things. Okay, if money is ejaculated, first thing is you do ghusl and you immediately become pure and immediately can start your salah. So that's the first thing. Second thing that is also mentioned is you just make wudu and wash your private parts. That's it. You don't make ghusl and then you sleep. Okay. And the third thing is you do not do anything and you just go back to sleep. So which one should you do? So obviously ghusl is definitely, you immediately become, you reach the state of purity. So that's better. But Rasulullah ﷺ also did this one time, that he did not do ghusl. He just went and he washed his private parts, and then he made wudu, and then he slept. Okay, this is permissible. In fact, Umar radiallahu anhu asked, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may anyone of us sleep when he is in a state of impurity? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yes, if he does wudu. If he does wudu. So, but if somebody doesn't even want to do wudu, if he sleeps, it's not haram. He can sleep like that. But there's a little problem. The problem is that angels will not come near you. Okay? Angels will not come near you, because there is a hadith in Abu Dawud. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that there are three people. There are three whom the angels do not approach. There are three people, the angels do not come near them. One of them is the one who is junub. One who is junub, the angels do not come here until he does wudu. Until he does wudu. Okay? So now, if you don't have angels near you, that means that you are being deprived of blessings. And maybe, wallahu alam, the protection that you usually get from adhkar and all those things, you might be risking that protection from shayateen. So you might be having problem waking up for fajr and things like that. So notice here that we mentioned that if you have this ejaculation of mani, you are required to do ghusl. So, but if you just make wudu and sleep and not do ghusl, you still cannot pray, right? You still cannot pray salah. But you're making wudu. What benefit is that wudu though? You're not in a state of purity, you're just making wudu. So Rasulullah ﷺ, this was his sunnah, that there is some level of purity that you will reach, because of which perhaps the angels will start coming near you. Okay? Even though you didn't make ghusl, angels will come near you, the blessings might come near you, and the protection of Allah will come near you. This thing applies regardless you're married or not. Even if you are a teenager or anybody, and if you see this ejaculation, then if you don't want to make ghusl, then at least make wudu. You will have the company of angels, inshallah. Now, so we discussed extensively these two, madhi and mani. So the last thing remaining is wadi. Now this particular one, this is a white discharge, but this one is not really sexual discharge. This happens when it can happen when you are urinating. After your urination, sometimes this might come out, and this is kind of similar to madhi. This is very small in amount, and sometimes when people are sick, that might also come out. So this happens. And sometimes people say that when you're carrying heavy objects, also this can come out. Okay, and this has nothing to do with sexual desire. So this can just come out without you even thinking about anything. Okay, some people notice this, not common to everybody. This obviously it has no exhaustion, so it just comes out, and sometimes people don't even know that they had this. And the problem here is that this is najas. Okay, so some people might see that, they might tell themselves that I didn't had any sexual thoughts in my mind, but I still see some discharge on my clothes. So that's probably the wadi discharge. Okay, and this is same as madhi in the sense that it is najas. You have to clean it. You have to clean it. Your private parts and the clothing, both of them. And obviously, as we said, if something comes out from your private parts, your wudu is immediately broken, regardless of what it is. All of these three, wudu is broken. So you have to make wudu as well. Okay. Do you have to do ghusl for this particular one? Wadi? No. Okay. This was the one that we mentioned there. Ali radiallahu anhu. He was shy because, how was he related with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? The son-in-law, right? So obviously with family member there's going to be more shyness, so he didn't want to ask, and obviously her daughter is involved, so you don't want to discuss these things. That's why he sent a sahabi to ask, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that if you see urethral discharge, just wash your male organ and perform wudu, same as wudu of salah. But he said if semen appears, then perform ghusl. Now, for married men or in general, what happens sometimes is they are involved in sexual activity and there is a discharge of money even. So they go and they take a shower, they take a ghusl, and they come out, maybe they go to work, and maybe when they are using the bathroom, they notice that there's a white discharge there. Maybe the remnants of the sperm or the money came out later on, and they see it on their clothes. What should they do now? Those were probably the remnants of money. What should they do? Should they do ghusl at work? I don't know how that's possible. But the thing here is that whatever that came out, if it was a remnant of sperm, this definitely didn't come out of desire. It was just hanging in there in your private parts, and it came out, probably you bent or you moved or you walked fast, it just came out. So this is definitely not money, but because for money, something to be characterized as money, it has to come with excessive desire, okay? So that thing that was remnant, that didn't come out of desire. So we say that it is just regular discharge like madhi and wadi, which requires wudu. You have to still make wudu, but and obviously it's also najas. You have to clean it. If it was a remnant of sperm, then if you know it for sure, then it's tahir. You don't have to. But otherwise, it's better you sprinkle your clothes as well, and then you make wudu. So don't just rush to make ghusl. Don't come back home and take a ghusl if you see such remnants. It does not require you to take ghusl. Sometimes what happens when they are performing the sexual activity, they reach the orgasm, highest point of the sexual desire, but for some reason the sperm or money is not ejaculated. It stays behind in your organ. This can happen. It's rare, but it can happen. Maybe you're blocking it, or maybe your private parts it's touching against something, and the discharge is not coming out. You're not ejaculating. So you had your orgasm, but you don't see any fluid, any discharge at all. So what do you do in this case? Do you make ghusl or not? So the scholars mentioned that it is not necessary for you to do ghusl. Because for you to do ghusl, you have to see the discharge. So it has to be with eyes. It has to be not by feeling. It has to be with the discharge. And this can happen also when a wet dream happens, that this you feel in your dreams that you had a discharge, you felt like it, but when you woke up, you didn't see any discharge at all. Even in that case, you do not have to make ghusl. This was the opinion of Imam An-Nawawi, rahmatullah alayh. This money here is that even though this is not najas, physically it is not impure, but spiritually you reach a state of impurity. Okay, so that's the main difference that you have to know among all these three. This is something which is not najas.
The husband and wife is the sexual activity involved, but not the discharge involved.
Yeah.
Still need the ghusl.
No. So, okay, the brother is saying if a man and a woman perform sexual activity and there is no discharge involved, okay, there is no money involved, then definitely they don't need to do ghusl. Okay, so money is very, very easy to notice. It's not like 1 or 2 drops. You know it for a fact that it is money, it is sperm, because you have orgasm. You reach the highest level of the sexual desire. So you know that you did ejaculate. So if this is the only case where you do ghusl, all other cases you do not do ghusl. But most probably when a woman and a man is involved in sexual activity, most of the times this is the one that's emitted, madhi. And only thing that you have to do is you just make wudu and clean your private parts. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sometimes before going to salah in the masjid, he would, for example, kiss his wife and then go. Okay, so even though that's a sexual activity, it does not necessarily mean that madhi will be ejaculated or madhi will come out, right? So that is not the case. So madhi, you know it that you felt that level of sexual excitement because of which that discharge happened, then you have to do wudu again. But in that particular instance, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not make any wudu at all. He just went straight to salah after kissing the wife.